Hello and welcome to what is probably going to be episode 516 of the HaskinCast Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and as you can see, if you're watching the video version of this, hopefully there's a video version, otherwise what I just said will make no sense whatsoever. I have a couple of wonderful guests with me returning to the show, Mike Shannon. Mike, how are you?
Good. Great to see you again.
Great to see you, my friend. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. And with us for the first time is Mike's wife, Julie Shannon. Julie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Scott?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Is this your first ever podcast?
Yes.
Nice.
I think I would notice if I ever did one before. No, yeah, this is my, I was thinking about it.
I joked around with a friend of mine and I asked her, I said, do you have any kids that you know of? And she just kind of looked at me like, wouldn't I know if I had a kid? I'm like, that's the joke.
Yeah, it's a joke, get it?
I use that joke all the time.
It didn't go over so well for me. So hopefully this will go better. No, I'm really excited to have you guys on the show. Mike, you've been on a bunch of times. You're an experienced veteran of podcasting. Now, Julie, this is new for you. I hope that it meets all of your expectations and that you have a good time. I think we're going to have a great conversation today.
Me too.
Absolutely.
Me too.
So you guys might remember that I got to know Mike and I also got to know Julie through the Uriah Heep, the Magician's podcast that is currently in process of being moved to another distributor. All the YouTube episodes are still available. I'm working on getting everything moved over, but I'm doing it much more intelligently this time since I've learned a lot doing it in the initial phase, and the way that I'm doing Deep Purple Smoke on the podcast is much more organized and I think a lot cleaner. So I'm kind of just reorganizing everything in a much nicer way. So those are coming to you as I get to them. And Mike was the one that made me do 2 more seasons because he found studio recordings that I did not. And I had to do episode after episode after episode, but I loved every bit of it, and I'm still grateful for it.
That was purely selfish. I just wanted more episodes.
It was. No,
I really,
not joking.
well, I mean, it was part of my routine, getting up, listening to your great podcast.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's got to be more. I'm like, there are. Wait.
Well, thank you very much. And you know, it's interesting how podcasts have become such a part of our life. I've talked to so many people that say, you know, I listen to your show on my morning walk or when I'm out, you know, playing with my dog or on my commute or like it really integrates into our lives. And that's why I'm so concerned about keeping my schedule, because I've noticed that when shows I listen to take a week off, and a lot of them will do that for holidays as well. We're going to be off next week. I'm like, don't you record a month ahead of time? Can't you squeeze another episode in there? Come on.
Yeah.
My week feels weird because I don't have that that consistency anymore. It's a very strange thing. Do you guys notice that?
Yeah,
I do. Yeah.
I listen to podcasts. I have a few, yours included,
Thank
that
you.
I'm just used to listening to during, like, you know, oh, they usually drop on Monday. Where's my podcast? You know, because I do.
It's true.
I have certain things I do while I listen to it,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Me
agree.
too. Yeah, me too.
It's like you're letting me down.
Right. Yeah. Well, fortunately for the last year plus, I think I've not missed an episode on HaskinCast and never missed an episode on the Magician's Podcast. I just ran out until you brought those to my attention, and waiting for the new album to come out, and ended up with 399 episodes of that show. And
Amazing.
I'm really hoping that after they're done with their big world tour, that they find some time to go back in the studio and do another album, because I would be very excited to jump in and do another review series.
I heard recently, but I cannot confirm it, that they indeed are going to do another album. But every time I try to confirm that, I haven't been able to. But I'm certainly hoping that is the case. Yeah.
Well, I'll have to reach out to Mick and see if he can
Please do.
elaborate on that at all. You know, the thing is, there's always the hope, right? No band ever wants to say this is the last thing that we're ever going to do. And, you know, I look at Deep Purple, and they've been on the Long Goodbye tour for a long time. And finally, they just gave up and they just call it their next tour, because even they don't know when they're going to stop, you know? And Ian Gillan, I think, is going to turn 80 this year.
Yeah.
And still,
Unbelievable.
when I saw them last August, sounded the best I've heard him since Perfect Strangers. And I'm like, wow, that's just amazing. You know,
It is amazing, actually.
Yeah.
yeah.
So he's He's a legend. Yeah,
Oh,
legend.
absolutely. Yeah. I had the pleasure of meeting him very, very
That's
briefly at a
that
meet
is
and
cool.
greet on his solo tour for the Gillen's Inn album. I wish it could have been longer, but I'll take the 13 seconds I got with
Yeah.
him and say, that's what I could get. I'll take it.
13 more seconds than me, man.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, it was long enough to do what's the most important thing to me, which is shake his hand and say thank you for everything I've enjoyed, everything I've
Right on.
learned from you, and
No,
everything that you've
that's
given to us.
that's
And
cool. That's
as
cool.
long as I get the chance to do that, I mean, I could talk to him about a million things, but that's the most important thing I could do to give back, you know.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay, you
That's
guys are going to turn this into a music podcast.
Yeah,
So.
that's right. All right. So
good.
we're here because I'm kind of doing a little bit of an unplanned series. You know, the first episode of the month now is turned into a classical music review, which I'm really enjoying right now. The first of the month, I'm digging into a different section of Mozart's Requiem,
That's
starting at the
cool.
beginning of July. And
Awesome.
that was amazing to dig into, very unexpected, how
Mhm.
that turned out. I've got something lined up after that, which I'm really excited to get into as well. So this series has just kind of unfolded, and I'm really excited to get into this. We're talking about the paranormal. Mike reached out to me and said, "Hey, I've had a lot of experiences, and Julie has too." So I thought, man, what a great thing to talk about. And I'm always fascinated by things that are unplanned, out of our normal world, the things that we can expect of the world, the things that we understand of it, and the things that we don't. And when those things occur and those worlds collide, it's so fascinating to me, and the different experience, because it's such in every one of them is such an individual experience
Yes.
that they're like clouds. I mean, no two of them are the same. So,
Nicely
Mike,
put.
I know that you said that you've had experiences all your life. How about you, Julie? What was the first experience? Do you remember?
I don't think I've had experiences all my life like Mike. Mike from childhood, has had experiences. And I can't think, see, I think Mike is a receptor,
Mhm.
you know, and I started having experiences, I think, when we started to, yeah, when we started living together,
Mhm.
so that would be in our early 20s, what, like 22,
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I've always, I guess, been a believer, if you will. But, because my mom had had some experiences as well that she told me about. But yeah, I never really experienced it too much until I was with Mike. But I think that whatever it is, I don't know, I don't want to call it like spirits or whatever it is, it likes Mike. It
Mhm.
does, really, so I don't know if you're sensitive or what have you, but yeah,
Well, he's a good guy. I mean, why wouldn't people living or dead gravitate towards you?
exactly.
Well, my philosophy on it's always been that, I know some people like to hone their abilities. I've never wanted to do. I always feel if something happens, I'm up for it and I like to experience it, but I don't go seeking it out.
Right.
It's never been
Yeah.
my thing.
Mhm. Yeah,
I'm
I
glad
think
you haven't.
that's the thing, is that you can, if you're a receptor, you're just a receptor, and it's, you can, if there's some way to learn to control it, that would be great. But
Yeah.
it's like, I think let's just assume that all this, for argument's sake, is really spirits of people that have lived and passed on, because we don't know if it isn't maybe something else. I mean,
Yeah.
it could just as easily be, let's say, an alien race that doesn't have a physical body. It could be a lot of things that
Right.
could potentially explain some of these experiences.
Absolutely.
But let's just assume that it's dead people that are still, some element of their energy is still here, and some of them have the ability to manipulate us intelligently. Because I believe that there are some things that just seem residual because they repeat without
Yes.
interaction. And then
Yeah.
there's some things that interact, like experiences that I've had that I've talked about on the show, where definitely what I've experienced was interacting directly with me.
Yes.
I think it's fascinating that they have the ability to interact with the world without a physical body, and it makes me wonder what we could do having a physical body, but not needing to use it for things.
Very
Interesting.
That is actually very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
I mean,
interesting.
do we have some sort of telekinetic abilities
Yeah.
that we don't know how to use because we don't have to? You think about people losing a sense, right? And how other senses kind of become
Take
stronger
over.
because you're dependent on it. What if we just don't ever develop those senses because we have the body to do it?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of theories that are one interesting theory, I think, that when we experience a paranormal occurrence, that it's this sort of a part of our subconscious that is interacting with the directed consciousness of, say, a deceased person. And collectively, we create this, what some people call an apparitional drama. We create it together, and then we experience it. And of course, there's problems with that because that would suggest it's just purely a mental kind of thing that you wouldn't be able. It's not actually in physical space.
Mhm.
And I think there's just too many, or often there's experiences that really do suggest that apparitions are actually communicating with us in physical space. So
Right.
I don't know, but I do like the idea of the idea. I like the idea of the idea, but I do like that idea.
Yeah.
That's
I
deep.
like,
Yep.
I like the
These are right.
I like the concept of our unconscious acting with the consciousness of another being. They call it the
Right.
mid-level constituents of our consciousness, and then we create these, so we can see an apparition or whatever. That to me is intriguing. Of course, that's completely theoretical, but
Right. Well, I think that's the problem is a lot of it really has to be because it's not like you dig up dinosaur bones, you can say dinosaurs were real. Here's the proof of them. We have some tangible evidence. We really don't have that. We don't have anything other than experiences. We have some things have been caught on film, but it's, especially now we were talking about AI before we started recording. Everything you see is now questionable whether it's a real photograph or generated. So now you really can't believe anything you see. You have to go with eyewitness testimony. And then that's always been a questionable thing. So it's really difficult. I wish we could do what they did in the movie The Entity, where they trapped this poltergeist in a chamber and
yeah,
they froze the energy,
yeah,
and now you have like a
Yeah.
physical, because if it's energy, even though it might be invisible, it seems like it has to take up some element of physical
absolutely,
space,
yeah,
even though you might be able to walk through it because the atoms are so far apart, or
sure.
I'm getting a little too scientific right now,
No,
but
but it's
it seems like it would have to still have a physical
yeah,
presence, even if it's not a tangible, like you can't reach out and touch it.
exactly.
It seems like that could be possible, but I don't know. I should ask my friends over at Spring Paranormal Investigations what they think of that, and then they'll try to do it.
Yeah.
You should ask them. That'd be
Yeah.
curious. See, I always think that I don't know if the human race is ever meant to fully. I think we're given hints sometimes. I think there's supposed to be tantalizing hints that there is more to life than just this physical kind of existence. And I think
Yeah.
that's sort of the beauty of it, is that we are just given hints because we're not I don't think that that's the purpose of this life, is just to constantly wonder about the dead and to wonder
Yeah.
about the other
Right.
side. I mean, we're meant to live.
Mhm.
But if you're interested in, the paranormal, it's hard not to kind of just dive deep into it. But I don't think humanity will ever fully, and nor should we fully understand really what's going on. But I think they're tantalizing glimpses.
Yeah. I mean, we did that for a while.
Yeah, we did.
Back, I forget,
90s.
the 90s. Yeah. We were part of a ghost research.
Two of them, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was really interesting. But I don't know. You couldn't help but like dive in the way Mike's talking about. But I wouldn't want my whole life to be focused around the dead,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and I feel like when you want something to happen, that is when it is not going to happen.
Oh,
Mhm.
When you gather everyone around and you have all your recorders going and someone tells you, we see a ghost here every night at 3 a.m. and it's just not going to happen that day.
Although we did do one investigation where just a bunch of stuff happened at
Yeah, we did.
Country House Restaurant, which is not super far from here. And this place was an old roadhouse going back to the 1920s. A woman supposedly was killed out front, hit by a car. That place is just mind-blowingly haunted. And just talking to the people that work there, from the janitor up to the waiters and waitresses to the bartender, everyone's had something happen in this place. And we were there, and we were upstairs in the what was it, for the workers, the staff.
Their break room kind of.
And we had some just incredibly weird things happen. We heard these huge thumpings coming from the attics. We got a ladder, and I started to climb up with, a handheld tape recorder. I would walk up 3 steps, try and push record. It would make this bizarre squealing, hissing sound.
Oh, wow.
Step down 2 steps, record. Step up, and if it was already recording, it would pop off and make the weird squealing sound again.
Right.
Interesting.
But then I was with that psychic, Elizabeth, and we heard 2 people talking in this brightly lit room right next to us. There was nobody there. And I mean, there was just 2 people.
And we purposefully would separate, so you wouldn't get that contaminated.
Right. That's so important, is that cross-contamination of sound, especially. And being a sound engineer, I can definitely appreciate the importance of that. I want to ask you a question about that. But first, I'm going to kind of further my energy theory, because something just dawned on me. There is is it a Connect or something, some kind of video game component where it reads your body so that you can interact with the game. And it like takes all these pixels and puts all these dots in the room. Those have detected energy that is not physical.
You see those on a lot of shows, like like what Ghost Adventures and things like that.
And also the Tesla cameras that have when they're panning the road and people are driving through cemeteries, and they're detecting bodies that aren't there, but they're detecting the energy or something of it. So there has to be some kind of physical component for the electronics to be able to detect them.
I think so, because some of that is very intriguing, because usually when you see, the general outline of you see the hand, the elbow, the shoulder, the legs. Sometimes they're doing like little jigs or whatever they're doing. But they're usually doing them in spaces where a physical person would be.
Right.
Whether it's a child or an adult. So it's they're not just like floating upside down in the air.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're generally like on the ground, or they're in a chair. It does seem to be picking up something in the physical space, which is very intriguing.
And that kind of makes me think, you were saying, Scott, about how you could walk through an entity. And I know you were joking about that movie, but you figure we're all made of atoms, and atoms are mostly space, and we are mostly space. If you took all the space out of, now I'm not a scientist, and I've heard people say we could fit on a pin, the head of a pin. I don't know whatever, but if you took all the space away from our bodies, we would be very, very, very small, tiny. And so I wonder if that has something to do with that, like seeing through an apparition or being able to walk through. Maybe there's still that atomic makeup, to an entity or whatever it is.
So like it's not, so like there's more space, like a huge amount of space between the atoms, as opposed to us, which would be a very minuscule amount of space between the atoms.
Right.
So we appear physical and they don't.
I also think that the universe gives us winks once in a while, because there is that very famous footage, and now I don't know if it can be found, because certain things like this, people like to have that not be seen sometimes, or whoever the powers might be. But it was during Wimbledon in, I think, 1980. And a tennis ball literally went through the net.
Yeah.
And they zoomed in on it, and you can see it, matter going through matter. And the announcers at the time were commenting like, I can't believe I just saw that. Yeah. That tennis ball just went through that net. They're joking about it by the end of the,
Right. Why would you be joking?
Because they didn't understand it.
No, yeah, exactly.
But then, on the highlights at the end of that Wimbledon, they're not showing that again.
Right.
It's like, that's weird. We don't understand that. Let's not talk about it.
Yeah.
But it
does suggest something about the, whatever, about what physicality is, or
Yeah.
so it's
Right.
very
Well,
interesting.
it is interesting. If you guys have ever seen What the Bleep, which is a fascinating scientific documentary on this kind of stuff. They talk about energy. One of the things they get into is messages that we put into the energy, like is it Masaru Emoto, who was taking water and would put positive messages on one bottle of water and the negative on the other and freeze it and examine the crystals and the difference in the beauty of the crystals, of the positive and negative. So obviously the emotion, the world impacts physical energy. They also talked about atoms and what you were talking about, Julie, and how there is space between the atoms and we're really not solid objects. Sometimes I think that for whatever reason, I do think that things happen where we do get a separation that just maybe while it's not common, everything comes together in just that perfect moment where something bizarre happens and a tennis ball can go through a physical object without being ripped to shreds. And I think we've seen plenty of evidence in history that show that things can happen, that just we look at our laws of physics and we want to believe in them, just like we want to believe that we understand history. The problem is when we find out that things aren't the way we thought they were, or that there's exceptions to some of those rules, we don't want to deal with it as a society. So we just go, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, let's look over here at this thing that we understand. And I mean, I remember watching a UFO video with a friend of mine. It was one of the really famous ones, the Dome of the Rock video, where this UFO came and hovered over some kind of a religious building, and then it just hovered there. And this was caught from multiple cameras, and it just took off from a dead stop. And my friend said, "This is obviously fake." And I said, "Why is that fake?" He goes, "Because it's not possible to take off at that velocity that fast." I said, it's not possible for us to do that. We don't know how to do that.
We don't know how to.
Within our understanding of physics, we don't know how to make that happen. That doesn't mean that didn't happen. It just
There's also been some
do
theories that when you see UFOs moving in such a manner that the beings inside are like, semi-sentient. They're not actually, there's something sent ahead to be able to handle these things, but they can do tasks, they can maneuver the craft, but they're not actually the creatures, or whatever, aliens proper, as it were.
But there might not even be an entity in there. They could be completely remote controlled for all we know too.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Right. Sort of like drones that we have now.
Although one thing that I always thought about with UFOs, which always bothered me, is these things are theoretically either coming from another dimension or across millions of light years. And they just crash all the time down here.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I thought about that too. And I mean, obviously there's probably a good amount of them are interacted with in a very aggressive manner. But also, just because they have the intelligence to get here doesn't mean they necessarily understand the environment or that they're prepared for the environment. And we also tend to think of there's us and there's aliens. There could be millions of different races with their own technologies, with their own understandings, their own ideas. A UFO that crashes today might be the first time they've ever come to Earth. What gets me is when it's more the arrogance of people going, well, if they're able to come here, why don't they talk to us? I'm like, why are we so important? I mean, there's the idea too that we're a tiny little speck in our galaxy. We are a tiny planet. Exactly. They might not even know we're here, let alone the ones that do find us.
Or they think of us almost as just, like as some people have suggested, their technology is so far advanced and their knowledge is so far advanced that they look upon us as ants, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the first time that you're exploring the rainforest, you just go up and shake the hand of every creature you see. No, you're going to want to study it a little bit.
Not recommended.
Make sure they're not dangerous, and there's a lot of assumptions, and it's interesting because I'm going to tie this to our pre-recording AI conversation. I hear so many composers are upset that AI is using their music to learn from. That's arrogant to me. Like, do I think I'm so important that AI has picked my music out of all the bazillions of songs that are out there and is
Yeah.
learning from me and infringing on my rights? Because it
Yeah.
probably has no idea I exist. It's the more likely thing. But I equate that to aliens too, because like I said, we're such a tiny little dot.
Yeah.
We
Mhm.
think we're interesting. We think that we're the most technologically advanced thing in the universe. We're probably not. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's interesting to see how people come together with that. But
Yeah.
I'm curious about this place that you were talking about. So you said that somebody was killed out in front of this restaurant, and the restaurant is haunted. I'm assuming that they think that it's probably that person that got killed. Why do you guys think, and I'll start with you, Julie,
Mm.
why do you guys think that if somebody dies traumatically, they want to just hang out where that happened? I mean, that seems like you'd want to get as far away from your trauma as possible.
Right. Well, I think there's many ways of looking at it, but I think the romantic way of looking at it would be that they want whatever it is wants to be known, like this happened to me here, everyone stop and realize that this happened, whether it be just recognition or revenge, like I'm gonna freak people out now. And or it can be something more scientific. I won't say I'm, like I said, I'm not a scientist, but
Mhm.
maybe because there's so much energy, there's that emotion. You were talking about putting emotion into the water and then the ice crystals form differently. Maybe there is something about all that intensity and, fear and dying. And that's the most intense thing I think we're going to go through.
Mhm.
And that somehow imprints in that area. And
Yeah.
Mike, this was before we started recording, but Mike was talking about how maybe it's just a part of the original form.
Mhm.
Maybe it's just that part. It's not the whole, like if it were me, it's not the whole of Julie, or the
Mhm.
not the
Yeah.
whole of Scott, but just part of you that went through that trauma
That
Very good.
so
that
so like
stays there.
splitting up our energy from like maybe whatever our home base of energy is, and then maybe we have part of it that lives in us, part of it that, stays here as a ghost or something like that. I could see that being very possible, yeah. I've often wondered too if, when we talk about a higher power or maybe what people pray to, what if that's us? What if that's our base of energy that we're trying to connect with to guide ourselves through the physical incarnation, because I've heard people say, I didn't bring enough energy for this life. And I think we
Yeah.
all feel a little exhausted. I have to wonder if maybe that isn't part of how it really is.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
That's actually very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking of something that just popped out of my mind. I had
Mhm.
something pertinent to add. Sorry.
I don't
Oh, that's
doubt it.
okay.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I was asking
It's a
why,
part of.
why we would want to stay in a place of our trauma. I think about a car accident I was in when I was, just before I turned 14. Horrible day in my life. I very easily was about to die. I remember being loaded into the ambulance and everything getting fuzzy, and the last thing I heard was we're losing them. And
Wow.
Wow.
I,
Very
I
exciting.
I think about that, and I think about if I had died right there where I had the accident, why on earth would I want to stay there? And just look at that and go, yeah, this is where I'm stuck now because I died right here. Everyone
Yeah.
who can't see me, look, this is where I got hit. Like that would, I think, that would be hell on earth, I would think.
Maybe it's because the energy is shifting so intensely at that point. We are leaving our physical selves, if you actually die in this place, that you're leaving your physical self, and that just creates sort of a traumatic thing. I know some people talk about things being etched in stone or whatever. We did live in a place where the walls were incredibly thick, and that
Yes.
we experiences there were almost nonstop for the first few months. So
Really?
I remember I was going to say, and I just forgot again. Go on.
Okay. No, and we did.
Oh, I remember. I'm sorry.
Okay, let him say it before he
the
forgets.
idea of that. I know in the early days of the Society of Psychical Research, out of England, goes back to the 1800s. They did research where people just like, I'm going to appear to you, Scott, tonight as an apparition, and I'll be wearing a top hat and whatever, and I'm going to do that at between 1 and 1:30 in the morning. And then, so the other person would be waiting, watching, also tuned into this. And their success rate for this over there, I forget how long the research went on, was incredibly high. Actually, they wouldn't say what they're wearing. I'm going to appear to you. You tell me what I look like to you.
Yeah. Safe confirmation.
And so the person would then appear wearing I saw you. You did appear to me last night. Freaked me out, but you were wearing a trench coat. You were wearing a jauntily set off, stovepipe hat, and you had gloves, leather gloves on or whatever. And the frequency of this being correct was like incredibly high. It surprised me that then they stopped this research, and then it hit me. I've talked to Julie about this before. I wonder how much of the research that like groups like the Society of Psychical Research had conducted sparked interest in governments, whether the English government, the American government, the Russian government, whoever, because things like remote viewing too, obviously huge success rates with that. So these things are going on. I think that the success rate was just it's like, okay, this is successful. We can transfer this for our own governmental needs, spying, what have you.
Right.
Right.
You just have to wonder, because living apparitions, I mean, I find that a fascinating concept. And it's like, wow, why haven't modern groups tried to recreate these very successful tests from like the SPR back in the late 1800s, early 1900s? Because they are having a huge success rate with that. Mm-hmm. Who acquired that information and maybe proceeded to do something else with it?
Yeah.
Right. And then how far would that have come by now? Mm-hmm. Sometimes when things happen, I mean, who knows what's been uncovered once again by our secret governments? Who knows?
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, it's very true that it's known that remote viewing is a real thing, and that they have utilized that. They've hired people to test them and things like that. That's very well documented. I'm fascinated by remote viewing. I think it's such an amazing thing. The ability to go beyond your physical being and look at things that are happening in other places, and not just on Earth. I mean, they've remote viewed Mars and the moon, and I mean, to that just boggles my mind, because it's one thing. I think you could convince yourself. You could be given like a like LSD or something, where you've convinced yourself that this is a real experience. And I suppose you could probably do that with another planet, but they're talking about specific coordinates, specific things that they know are at specific coordinates. Like, there's no just giving somebody drugs and getting around the results that they're getting. I mean, it's obviously a proven thing to be real, and that fascinates me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about here, it kind of pops into my head, the different experiences that, before this podcast, we thought, oh, we'll get our thoughts together and we'll probably never even look at it. But we came up with pages.
Several pages.
Yeah, pages of different experiences.
It is weird because you
that
think,
we've had.
Yeah, you think generally, well,
but they're different.
I had a few things. Yeah, they're also.
It's not like a ghost does this.
Yeah,
it's like it's all different things and we can get into more specific if you want, but but like, well, I'll let Mike talk about. He had a lot of things in his childhood, but they're different. It's not just one thing that would happen. So I'll let you. I don't know where you want to take that, but
I like that, Mike, that you kept remembering and forgetting what you were going to say, because it reminded me of that episode of Three's Company where Mr. Furley kept coming upstairs and knocking on the door because he remembered, and then something would happen and he'd forget again. That was a fun episode. I do think that it's interesting that some people seem to be at a certain, I'm going to say it's at a certain vibration. that
That
allows
vibration.
them to connect with that energy. And obviously your general vibration is within whatever that range, because I'm going to assume it's a range of
I
different
think so.
vibrations probably.
That
The
makes
fact that
sense.
it
Yeah.
would be one frequency just seems too unlikely to me.
Yeah.
But think about your ghost and you have a message, or you're lonely. I mean, it's got to be lonely to be a ghost, and you're just wanting to interact or something with some kind of, you know, thing or person that you can interact with. If you
Yeah.
find somebody who notices that you're there, yeah, you're absolutely going to want to interact
Yeah.
with them. I mean, that really does make a lot of sense. So if you're, you know, if you're in a room and there's one flashlight that's on, which flashlight are you going to grab?
Right.
You
Yeah,
know?
the one that's on.
Exactly, and that's the one you're going to
Yeah.
take with
That's
you.
very
So
true. Yeah.
so that part of it I totally get. And I, you know, I try to put myself in the position of others and trying to think of what that must be like, um, to just scream and shout and no one can hear what you're talking about. You can't just write something down for somebody to read and be able to communicate with them in any way that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the torture
No.
that must be, like watching
It's like
people going around having fun, living their lives, and you're just like, I can't
it's a
even
version
move
of
a pencil.
hell, essentially. Yeah.
It seems like it would be, yeah. But I also wonder what time is like for a ghost. You know, they
I've often
say
Yeah.
thought
on
about
the
that.
other side, when you're between lives,
Yeah.
it, you know, like a life on Earth goes like that. Like for us, you could live to be 120, but on the other side, it's over like
Well,
that. And I think,
that's
wow,
one.
Right.
that's interesting. What if you're still here?
That's one
Yeah.
theory. Of course, they always say, that like people like myself who do not like the idea of reincarnation.
Hmm.
Um, so theoretically, then when I die, I go back to my celestial home and I meet my, they have the concept of your celestial family, the people that you continue, you're part of this group.
Right.
And then you will come back. One day I'll be the mother, one day I'll be the father, I'll be the
Yeah.
brother, whatever. And then anyway, you go back and they're like, oh, wow, I learned a lot of lessons there.
Yeah.
Now, but I don't want to go back. I want to stay with you. But Mike, it doesn't matter because you will go back again. But from, if you notice right now, how long did it feel like you were gone? Like 3 seconds. Exactly. So you'll go back again. And by the time you come back here, you'll have gained some more knowledge. You'll have learned some new lessons, and it will feel just like a second or two.
Yeah.
So,
I
I
always
mean,
like that
I like
concept.
that
I don't know.
concept. That concept makes it a little less like brutal, kind of
Yeah.
having to live again.
Well, okay, but I'm
Now,
sure that you've both been in situations in your life. I know I certainly have, where while you're going through it, it just seems like torture and you can't wait for it to end. And it, you know, it might be something that goes on for weeks or months or a year or so. And when you look back on it, you're like, now that I'm away from that situation, now that I'm not in
sure,
that moment, it's really not that big of a deal. But while you were
right?
in the process of it, it was horrible. That's
Yeah.
probably where we're at as far as
That's
that
very nice.
goes.
Yeah, that's nicely put. And that is true because I mean that's where the best
Yeah.
lessons come from, or from hardship and from
Mhm.
difficulties that we have to somehow use our own ingenuity to
Right.
overcome. So yeah, that makes a lot of
So
sense.
Yeah.
do you think, Mike, do you think that reincarnation doesn't exist, or do you just don't want it to because you don't
Oh,
want to
I
come
just don't
back to
want
this?
to. I
Okay.
absolutely, I absolutely believe it's probably a very good likelihood that some form of it in some manner, yes, does exist. But then they say at some point, if you're like the Buddhist kind of idea that we get to a certain point where we get to enlightenment. I'm kind of hoping I'm nearing that, even though it doesn't seem like I am right here. But I hope I'm,
You want me to tell you?
but, so that, when I'm done with this, it's like, guess what, Mike? You get to stay up in the celestial home.
Yeah.
Great, cool.
Yeah.
But
What about
yeah.
what about you, Julie? What are your thoughts on reincarnation?
Well, I'm sort of like, where Mike says, there's probably some form of it that exists. I like the thought of it. I like the thought of maybe getting another chance or learning something new with different incarnations.
Mhm.
But I just can't say whether I really believe in it or not. I love the Buddhist philosophies, but I always kind of stop at and they don't really believe in reincarnation per se. And my brain isn't like focused enough to get into really what that is. But
Yeah.
I always kind of stop there. So I don't mind the thought of reincarnation. It seems very confusing to me to come back. Like if we all came back, the way people you watch movies like the reincarnation of Peter Proud, and they he feels his past life. Like if we all did that, shouldn't we be a little wiser? And I don't see that a lot in today's society.
There should be more hints of enlightenment than there actually are.
Exactly.
But I think that's the point, though, isn't it? Is that if we came here knowing everything, we wouldn't really grow. We would blow a lot of things off. Maybe we need to learn the same lesson, but in a different way, or we need to learn how the world works, but in a different way. Because how would you discover things, right? If we walk in knowing how things work, you might not find better cures or better processes or that, because we just accept, oh, this is the way this is done. I think for me, though, it's hard to explain a 6-year-old boy who knows everything about how to fix a World War II aircraft.
Yeah, I agree.
A girl who's born in the United States who knows how to read and write Egyptian hieroglyphics. I don't know how to explain those things away, except to say that they were probably here before. And while all that knowledge is supposed to be locked away, sometimes it seeps through. And that's why we do have cases like that, because it didn't quite get closed off.
Or that there's that there is like a collective consciousness where this information is. And it is possible that an individual could tap into one thread of this sometimes. And could, like a little boy could be tapping into a guy who was a, World War II, pilot ace kind of guy, and acquire that information and sort of be like a conduit just for this one little bit that he's tapped into. I think about this. That's a possibility.
That's very possible. Yeah.
And just because it doesn't happen to me doesn't mean I can't believe in it. People say there's no such thing as ghosts, whatever, to put it real simply, because they haven't experienced it. Now, so the 6-year-old you're talking about, and when people can tap into a past life or the big zeitgeist kind of consciousness, maybe certain people can tap into that and certain people can't. And then certain people are aware of after I don't know what I'm just going to call it ghosts.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Supernatural activity. Sure. Some people paranormal. That's more where I'm going. Some people can tap into that and some people don't, and maybe it is because they don't want to,
I think quite often that's it. People they don't want to. And if they experience something, they rationalize it away.
Well, talk about like your cousin.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. This is interesting.
Well, I had a cousin, and she came home one day, and this is my uncle's house. It's a beautiful house, and he built it himself. He was a builder. And anyway, she came home. It was 1 a.m, whatever. And she said she got up to there's 3 levels to the house. She got up to the 3rd level where her room was, and a man appeared out of a darkened bedroom, glanced at her, took a right. She was, on the landing, took a right, walked down to the end of the hall, and there was a wall at the end of the hall, and just walked through the wall. Now, I remember as a kid hearing that story. I'm like, wow, that's just incredible. And my uncle and my dad's opinion of it at the time was, she was overtired. It's like she's overtired, so she's hallucinating a full apparition of a man.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I've been tired in my time. I don't hallucinate. I mean, you can hallucinate when you're tired, but usually that's days of being tired, not she worked late that night. And I was seeing people walking through walls.
Well, I mean, I remember when my grandfather died and we drove from Colorado to Michigan. We'd been at work all day. Then we, stopped and packed and got some snacks and hit the road, which was a 26-hour drive from Colorado Springs back to Detroit. Wow. I mean, late at night, and this was, driving through snow and all that too. And I mean, certainly some of those trees that were surrounding the billboards were monsters waiting to jump out. But there's a big difference between creating something from something that's already there. seeing a tree that looks like a monster or something like that,
Right.
versus just creating something
Yes,
completely out of thin
exactly.
air. That's
Yeah, yeah.
days of exhaustion to do that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, and that was not existing here. So, and then why would it be a man? Why would he be wearing the clothes that he was wearing?
Right.
You know,
Right.
Yeah.
why wouldn't he just be naked? Or why wouldn't he,
Right.
why is he wearing, the pants? I forget what she said he was wearing, but
Yeah.
he was wearing specific clothes and he was, oh, and that was something I wanted to bring up earlier too. You talk about, what do you call it? When I can't think of the term, when spirits appear, but they don't seem to have any knowledge or, um, help me.
I can't.
Are you talking about residual hunt?
Residual, thank
Right.
you.
Right.
Oh, okay.
The idea of a residual, one of the most fascinating cases I've ever read is the Cheltenham ghost. Are you familiar with the Cheltenham
I've heard of it.
ghost?
Yeah. Mm.
Okay, so she appeared to the Despard family dozens of times over a several-year period. And she was always considered essentially to be a residual spirit. She would appear, usually that she would see her out in like the little orchard they had by their house, the garden. She would then walk, always covering her face with like a handkerchief kind of thing. She'd cover her face for whatever reason. Long skirt, of course, it's a Victorian age. She would walk through the house, walk down a long hallway, walk up the stairs, and kind of just like vanish around the corner of this of the staircase. Usually is what happened.
Mhm.
The daughter, Rosina Despard, I forget her name. I think Rosina, something like that. Anyway, she became very brave and very interested in this thing because this was seen by lots of people, and sometimes for long periods of time, up to 45 minutes. The spirit would be seen.
It's amazing.
And sometimes she would just stand like, anyway, whatever. Anyway, so she would start to follow this. Usually she repeated a pattern, but she noticed if she were to like cut it off, it would change its path.
Oh.
And even more interestingly, she noted that she decided one night, I'm going to say stop.
Yeah.
And the apparition stopped. Now, this was what was considered a residual apparition. But now it's responding to this
Yeah.
one. So it's not a residual. In some way, it's not a residual apparition.
It might have been
to me,
repeating
that's
the same tradition, like your drive to work. You probably take the same way every day,
Exactly.
or
Absolutely.
something like that.
Yeah.
Might have just been reliving the experience, but because nobody did anything to change that pattern,
Right.
would have seemed residual because they're not interacting with it in any way. So that's interesting. I wonder maybe how many things that we think are residual maybe aren't just because nobody's reaching out.
That's what's driven me nuts for years, because you watch a lot of these, these shows, paranormal shows on TV, and the conviction of the narrator, well, that's clearly a residual spirit. We don't actually know, it's much more fluid, I think, than we have any understanding of. And, I don't think it's as clear cut as like, well, that's a residual. This is this. It's like, well, we don't know actually. So
but don't forget. I mean, when you hear people talk, every UFO is a mothership. Every, it's like whatever the worst case scenario is, whether it's, it's automatically that thing. And it amazes to me people's reactions to the world of paranormal. I guess I think it must be a certain element of fear, because I don't think real rational, intelligent people would be able to deny the fact that there's a lot on this planet that we don't know about, that we don't understand. I think people are afraid to know that, and that's why they easily dismiss a lot of stuff that we've seen. And until you have that definitive proof, like giant squids, for example, people for years were like, no, squids only get to be 8 feet long and blah, blah, blah. What about that 100-foot one that they have in Washington? I'm pretty sure that's more than 8 feet, but until you have some kind of tangible thing where people can't deny it anymore, it's easier to just go, I'm comfortable with the world I know, and that's the way I want to live my life. And I get that. I'm not being disrespectful or angry at those people. That's how they want to live, and that's fine. I'm a very curious mind. I want to know what the world is that I live in. I want to know what's out there that we don't understand. I'm fascinated by that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That I have no problem with people who's, I don't know, if they haven't seen it, they don't believe it. I totally get that. But I think when it comes to like, scoffing, just because you haven't, that's where it can be
maddening, annoying.
Okay. Yes, I was gonna. Yeah. For Mike, it's maddening because essentially they're calling you a liar.
Right.
Well,
they're also kind of calling you mental because now you're seeing things that aren't there. And it is offensive. But I would say I think we're heading in a positive direction when it comes to more people being open-minded about things.
Sure.
I think that, you think about back in the 40s, if you said you saw a UFO, I mean, they would institutionalize you for saying that you saw something like that. Pilots were not allowed to talk about that kind of thing at all.
Right.
It's very true.
It was very, very hush hush. And now, and maybe this is where our technology does become an advantage because so many people are catching things. Although I'm skeptical of everything I see because it's so easy to create it. People have caught a lot more things since the invention of cell phone cameras or even Instamatic cameras, where they just are more likely to be in a position to capture something than even things they can't see show up on film that maybe went too fast. And then when they are reviewing the footage, they're like, holy crap, did you see that? So I do think there is a stronger showing for the believability of things beyond our current understanding and more people being willing to, but there's still a lot that will just mock you for saying that you've seen anything, I
think a lot of that has to do with, even though some of the shows are rather ridiculous and, sensationalistic, the idea that there's so many paranormal shows out there, it almost does sort of normalize the idea. And I think a lot of people, and it just becomes part of like, consciousness. People just talk to each other. What'd you watch? Oh, I watched this. Oh yeah, that was weird when this happened, when that spirit did this or whatever.
And there are a lot.
I think it just enters the, just the normal sort of day-to-day sort of life of people, the mental life of people, that spirits are very likely to exist. I mean, it's hard to believe that in 1989, there was like one show, one 30-minute show that was, sightings, I think it was called. Do you remember that show?
Yeah.
I mean, that was like it, and all of a sudden now it's just incredible. But I mean, there's been a lot of, polls and things that have been taken in recent years that just show this incredible increase in, people have always had like superstitions. I mean, people crossing their fingers and like saying a certain number and doing a certain pattern of things. I mean, that's always existed, which is interesting in itself. But, these recent things, I think, has a lot to do with just the preponderance of these shows and how it's just entered the consciousness that people are much more open and willing to say, oh, yeah, I had a weird thing happen once, or I had this happen. I'm actually surprised now when I bring up my paranormal experiences or paranormal in general, that someone says, they never had anything, or they don't believe in it.
That hardly ever happens.
But 30 years ago, it would have been much more common.
Yeah.
Now it's much.
Whenever we have dinner with people that we don't know really well, like, you meet someone, oh, we should have dinner. It's like, oh, you sit down and it's like, I have nothing to say to you.
It happened not too long ago. Not too long ago.
But we'll usually bring up like something paranormal. And most of the time people have their own stories, And
even people you really don't expect are going to say anything. They're like, I did have a couple of experiences. Here they are. And it's like, I love that.
Sometimes you can't read their faces. Are they like, oh, great, we're having dinner with
a couple of
nutters.
nuts.
Well, but normally it's like, oh my gosh, should I say this? Because I do have one or two or three or four.
You would think after Jimmy Carter had come out and said that he had seen a UFO, that would have kind of opened the door. If the president of the United States is saying that, I think it's, safe to talk about what I've seen. But I think people experience things that they don't maybe admit to themselves too. If they're going along the lines of, I don't want to believe that this is real, then their mind will block out anything they've seen, or they'll find a way to dismiss it, like, oh, it's just a creak in the floor, or oh, I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye, but I must have been mistaken, instead of, no, you really did see something out of the corner of your eye.
And that creak in the floor, that's one of the things we wrote down. I'm going to let you talk about. Mike is much better describing these things, but one of our things that we do for pay is we have a pet sitting service, and we stay at people's houses, and we've experienced different things yeah, at different houses, and we're there often, different places, they use us like every once, twice a month. But I guess I am going to say, so we stay at this one house and it's a newer construction, and we stay, it's a really big house, and we stay at the top floor. There's 4 floors, 3 floors.
4 floors, but the top floor is like a suite.
Yeah, it is. And during the day, you don't really hear it, but during the night, and
It comes
things,
alive.
yeah, there's settling. And, I always grew up in older homes, so, you hear like the creak, 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 but this is like pop, 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 and knocking,
like that, yeah.
And it's just constant for a period of time.
Yeah, but that's one of the places I will talk out loud, because that place has had an incredible amount of activity, slamming doors, doors just opening in the middle of the night. And recently an orb appearing. I woke up in the night, I thought Julie's phone was on, and I thought she had her flashlight on her phone, but why would it be a perfect circle? And she was asleep. And it's floating over by this old bureau. And I'm like, whoa. Not scared, but just like, well, okay, I didn't expect that, because I had never seen anything there. I just like doors opening and stuff like that, knockings, but whoa, that was unexpected. And we've heard dogs barking there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we were watching this dog, and it's a hound dog, but we hear this little like
yip, little Yorkie. It's like, that's not the dog that's here.
Yeah.
I think the thing that would freak me out the most is I hear people saying that they hear their own voice from outside calling them to come in a room or open a door. And I'm like, if I heard my own voice, that would really freak me out, because that I couldn't rationalize as to what that is.
No, I've never heard my own voice. However, I have heard Julie's voice.
Really?
Actually, right in our apartment here, I heard Julie once. I was getting ready. It was in the morning, and I was getting dressed, and I heard her say in a very mournful, slightly urgent voice, "Help me," like that. It was Julie, 100%, and it was clear, and it
wasn't me.
And I came out like, what's wrong? I mean, I was freaked out.
Yeah, he was so concerned.
I mean, I was really concerned. Like, well, what's wrong?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? I'm like, you just said, help me.
Wow.
And he was afraid that was a harbinger of something.
Yeah, I was actually, because I, occasionally you read things, you hear like a help me.
Yeah.
But no,
I don't think anything dire.
But then
so far.
But then that was different to the voice in our bedroom. One evening, I was talking to Julie. I was talking about my first book I was writing. I'm like, I can't write at night. And then this woman's voice in my right ear, like 3 inches away, said, I said, I hate writing at night. I know you do. It was right there.
Oh,
I was like,
yeah, it wasn't me.
And I looked at Julie. I did look at Julie, even though
Although
it didn't sound like you. I looked at, I'm like, did you just say? I know I'm like, no. Anyway, so yeah, that was it. But yeah, different voices though.
Yeah, but it would be eerie to hear your own voice.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of like that living apparition Mike was talking about, where I'm going to send my likeness or my apparition to you, and you tell me what I'm wearing. Maybe it's sort of like that, like you're doing it to yourself. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, you figure. I mean, there are people,
or maybe a future version of yourself,
there are people with like psychic ability or what have you. So I mean, it's possible that a lot of what's happening is often living people interacting with other living people, and things are happening in the transference or the crossing of channels or what have you. But
our cat wants in again.
That's all right. There's another possibility to this whole thing too, and it kind of goes along my idea of the fact that maybe we have abilities that we just don't tap into, like telekinetic abilities and things like that. What if it's us doing our own like astral projection? And what we're seeing is ourselves.
That's absolutely a possibility. Sure.
Wow. So even you were talking before we started recording about the apparition you saw going down could that be you?
That's what I'm wondering.
I don't know how tall you are. You said
it was bigger than me, but I don't know if, how astral projection works. If you're the same size as your physical body, or if it spreads
Yeah.
out a
That's
little
true
bit
too.
more, you may be something completely different. It was a little bit bigger than me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Not to where I would have
maybe an
been
aura
scared
is
of the
involved.
size, but yeah. Yeah, very possibly. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's all these possibilities. And I think that's one of the things that fascinates me the most is that we don't have concrete answers.
No.
And I think that's the thing about a curious mind is that we don't know how the pyramids were built. We think we may have figured out how Easter Island was done, but only a part of how it was done. And that isn't
Exactly.
necessarily right. It's just a possibility. We may have figured out how they moved the statues, but certainly not how they got them out of the quarry in the first place. And I mean, there's
And
so
then the
many
full
things
bodies
that,
underneath the heads there that have
yeah.
been uncovered, which is just incredible.
Right. I mean, it's amazing to see them walking the statues down the road. I've seen the video of that, and I'm like, that is a brilliant possibility. But how did you get them up out of the quarry in the first place?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, and you're still not talking about a full-size Moa statue. You're talking about a very small one.
Yes.
And, so again, possible or may lead to an answer, but we don't have concrete answers. And those are the things that do prevent me from sleeping. I want to know all the answers to those things.
I
I want to know
that's
how the world works,
But
you
it's
know?
not, it's the not knowing, I think that's the magic of this existence,
Yeah.
is that we
Mhm.
don't know. That's what keeps our imagination like active and moving, if you let it, of course. But I
Yeah.
mean, that to me is the beauty of this world, is that there's magic all around.
Right.
And and occasionally you'll tap into that.
But I think the annoying thing is not that I want to know how this is happening, but we're talking about voices.
Mhm.
And Mike and I were staying at a customer's house, and I kind of just lifted my head off the
Oh,
pillow,
this is a good one. Yes.
and I heard this voice, and it was like 4 or 5 syllables, like more, that
But it
kind of
was
thing. And I sat up, and I have fairly vivid. There's times where if I'm stressed, I have very vivid dreams, and I'll like sit up, usually when I'm stressed, which I wasn't, but I'm used to Mike saying, there's no spiders, there's no this, there's no that, whatever I think I'm seeing in my, whatever woke me up, whatever freaked me out. And I sat up, Mike's like, I heard it too. And
Oh.
it's like when people talk about the goosebumps all over your body kind of thing. I totally had that. I thought my hair was going to stand up when he said, I heard it too. I'm like, you're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to say you're just dreaming.
This is another.
But neither one of us could tell what it said.
I was mad.
It was just like,
It was four
but
words.
it seemed like a woman.
It sounded like a later middle-aged woman.
Yeah. But oh boy, if I could
But
replay that,
this shows
I want to know.
This to me shows the importance of writing things down when they happen.
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
in my memory, I think of the voices coming from in front of us in the darkened bedroom, but no. As I wrote it down that night, it came between Julie's head and the pillow. A
Yes.
voice emanating
Oh.
from that
Yeah.
space right there. And
That's
it was
great.
a woman. I really wish I knew what she said. But
Too.
this was a newer construction. This is a huge townhouse, and we were in the basement. They, a huge finished basement. They had a spare bedroom down there. We were sleeping down there, and this woman's voice just came out. And after she was done, literally, I had like goosebumps because, but I felt the presence was. There was a woman in that room for a few minutes. You could just feel it.
Yeah.
I think she
Yeah.
was passing through. I don't know, because we never had anything else happen there. But and then we
Oh.
we made the foolish mistake. Usually we don't talk to our customers if we experience something in their house. We have done it before with people we know are probably more receptive with
Sure,
interesting
yeah.
results. But
Yeah.
anyway, we told this woman, and her husband is a doctor, and he lived away from home for much of the month.
Mhm.
He was downstate at his office, and he had an
Yeah.
apartment down there. Anyway, so she's like, I live here alone a lot. She's like, that's terrifying to me.
She was really afraid.
Yeah.
She
Oh.
wasn't
sorry.
scoffing. She was
Oh,
afraid.
No, she was a
I
believer.
felt so
She
bad.
said, she's
Yeah.
like, I'm a believer in
Yeah.
the paranormal, and that scares me.
Yeah.
Like you heard a woman talking down there.
Yeah.
But I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
it
I'm
makes
just
sense.
getting a glass of water. You guys.
It makes sense because one, I mean, obviously it's like we talked about earlier, the not being able to defend or protect yourself. But also I think Hollywood plays a part in that because we've certainly dolled ghosts up to all be evil, all be out to get us. I'm sure that
Absolutely.
those movie images like Poltergeist and things just immediately
For sure.
come to mind when you hear that.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Well,
that's interesting.
Even the paranormal shows on TV now play up, as I was saying earlier, play up the scary aspect. That's a demonic. It's a demonic presence or entity, which again is
because
ridiculous.
that's
Like
how you get your viewers, right? I mean,
yeah, well,
you
of
know,
course. But then, and it is all about viewers. Yes, I mean, it's like at the end of the day, these are TV shows. They need. It's all about numbers, and it's about getting viewership. So yeah,
Right.
But I can
But
say,
you know
and
what it is.
yeah, I'd be curious if you guys have experienced this too. In fact, I would expect that you have, but you've walked into a room and you just feel like there's someone there.
yeah.
We were talking about that before we came on. It's like, should we talk about feelings?
Yeah.
Because you do get a feeling, but they say feelings are not facts, but you do get a certain feeling, like something feels like different here. Something feels like almost, is it heavier? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like you just feel like there's something going on that can't be explained. And then we'll go into other houses, like, we'll stay at a house that's built 100 years ago and it looks kind of, dark wood and everything.
And nothing.
Yeah, like what you would expect to be like the haunted house.
Nothing. Absolutely.
And nothing.
Right. No.
But it is a feeling. It's like, and Mike will say that, I don't feel like there's anything here.
There is something to feeling sometimes, but with all the paranormal experiences I've had over the years, like when I've seen 3 full body apparitions in my life, I never felt like anything before it happened at all. But then I had this experience. I think I'll just tell them about this experience with my Julie was out of town. I was here alone, and I couldn't. We have two cats. They were different cats at the time. I couldn't find one, so I was looking around for her. I found her in our master bedroom, and the second I shut out the light, there was a clock ticking very loudly. I could hear the whirrings of the mechanism. Even it was like in my head. It was very intense. And so like, what the hell's that? And it seemed to be floating across the room. And then it seemed to stop at our closet door. So I put the light on. I opened the closet door. I walked in and I just started crying. Like, wow. My mom was there. My deceased mother. I could feel her. And I just, tears. I mean, I was just having a really chill evening. I wasn't doing anything.
Yeah.
And I also, I'm crying. I'm like, and then I felt though, that's why I'm bringing this up, this feeling of I guess you describe it as electricity almost, just completely surrounding me. Like I was encased in this shimmering electricity. Wow. And I spoke out because I just tell it was my mom. She was interacting with my mom, whatever. But I said, I believe it's you, Mom. I love you, whatever. And it just slowly dissipated. I called you right away. You're up in Wisconsin.
Yeah. And what's funny is you said you had the best night's sleep.
Oh yeah.
You would think you would be freaked out.
Yeah, most people would be like, wow, that was, no, literally, every light was out in the house. I went to sleep, and probably for the first time in, I don't even know, maybe since I was an infant, I slept all the way through the night. The best sleep I've had.
Well, there was probably some kind of calming effect, or just the fact that, you knew it was your mother and it was a chance to connect with her, and probably just gave you an immense sense of peace, and, just took away all your stresses for a while.
Absolutely.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I wonder too, though, how much we experience it, not necessarily us, but just people in general, going into a place that you expect something's going to happen because it's creepy, like a cemetery or a basement or an attic.
There's a whole, there's a whole theory about that.
Well, why would you haunt a cemetery? I mean, I could understand the idea of maybe visiting your grave, just seeing where your body was laid to rest, but there's nothing there. There's no reason to be at a cemetery if you're a spirit. That's another one I don't understand. So to me, I think it's a lot of us projecting, and that's where I start to go back to that. How much of it is us doing things versus there actually being something that we're sensing, because there's so many of those, oh, it's a creepy attic, oh, it's a dark basement, oh, it's late at night, or it's a cemetery, just places that you expect things to happen, and things do happen because you're expecting them as opposed to something that's real.
It's that idea of expectation.
Although we did have something happen in the cemetery, not an apparition.
We did have something, and it was not scary, but it was very paranormal.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about it?
You can tell.
Okay. We were, when you're in your 20s, you like to be all goth. So it was daytime, probably like 2 in
I
the
was more
afternoon.
metal than goth, but still.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. So we're taking a walk through this cemetery, and there are some very beautiful cemeteries in our area, in the Chicago area. So we're walking through, and there's ponds and blah, blah, blah.
Beautiful blue sunny day.
Yeah, and we're going walking down this path, and both of us, out of the corner of our eye, you were talking about the corner of your eye thing, it looked like a chipmunk's or something,
woodchuck
or woodchuck, something of that nature, scurrying underneath a tombstone.
Oh,
and I don't know, for both of us were like, oh, is a little baby rabbit, whatever. And we both, so we walked towards it, and we're like, oh, looking to see where it went. And we looked at the tombstone, and that person had died that day.
Almost like
it was like the anniversary of their
almost like the spirit was saying, come and recognize.
I mean, day
anniversary of my death.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And we thought and it's not like I don't know what it was, but
we both said some nice words for the person.
Yeah, we did. And we thought, oh, we should come here every year. We didn't. We totally forgot about what the day was. It must have been a summery kind of day because it was a nice day.
Right.
But yeah.
But there was no hole by the tombstone. It was something drawing our attention to this particular.
Notice I died today.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I want someone to recognize that. So I don't think that spirit necessarily was haunting the graveyard. But it's recognize that I existed here at one point.
That's a reasonable explanation, or especially like an anniversary. Because if you look at the way we're so tied to an exact amount of days from everything to celebrate, whether it's a death or a birthday or a work anniversary or whatever. We are so stuck on that as human beings, which is a whole psychological podcast on its own. But I wonder, I think if I were to go to the cemetery, I would look into my grave and go, I've looked better.
I hope so.
And in your defense, Mike, guys that are metal are basically just eyeshadow away from being goth. There's really not much of a difference.
Right on.
Yeah, no, it is interesting though, and I think again, there are certain things that kind of make sense. You could put together reasons why a ghost might be in a cemetery, or reasons why they might draw your attention to a specific location. I would think a murder. I'm surprised that, and maybe it's because they can't communicate with us, but there aren't more entities out there saying, hey, I'm this body that's a closed case or a cold case file. I can help you solve it if you work with, if we found a way to interact. And it's interesting because when Spring Paranormal Investigations was on the show recently, I asked them about, the ability to communicate. And it came down to just the physical ability. They can't use chalk to, pick up a piece of chalk and write on a chalkboard, or pick up a pencil and write down, because of the way their energy works. They can't really do that. They can push something, they might be able to manipulate, but that's actual pressing down, being able to pick up the weight of a pencil and that sort of thing. I think there's maybe some entities that can do that, but it led me to my idea about what a poltergeist is. Because poltergeists are known for picking up and throwing objects, right? They're very violent, very aggressive. But when I started looking at all the poltergeist cases I've ever read about, and I'm sorry, Amy Lee, if you're listening to this, I know you hate the word poltergeist, but I'm using this for an example, is that they're often in families that are in financial straits and often have very young children. Which goes back to my idea about telekinesis, and that young children whose minds may not have blocked out things, or they may be tapping into things more because their minds aren't as closed off as we become as we're adults, are the ones that are feeling the stress of the parents or the parent, and using all that frustration and the energy in the house and getting violent and being the ones that throw the objects, and maybe the ghost can't do that. So it's all, this is all speculation. I want to be very clear about that. But it does make me wonder if, again, that isn't maybe part of the rules of how this all works, because there has to be some kind of rules to it. What you can't do.
But
you had something like that.
I had some poltergeist activity. I grew up in South Carolina, and Now, of course, they say a lot of times poltergeist activity centers around, people going through puberty. And I certainly was going through a lot of mental turmoil at the time. I was an outcast growing up on a small barrier island, South Carolina. I was long hair. I was completely ostracized, and but of course, I refuse to change. I'm who I am. So whatever.
Right. I appreciate. I've been there, and I really appreciate that.
Right on, right on. So my thing was, of course, as a kid, you don't really know how to analyze. You don't analyze. You don't talk to your parents a lot necessarily. At least I didn't. And so I bought a lot of this up. And my sort of thinking is it needed to get out somehow. And that's why I think sometimes poltergeistic activity is sort of semi-sentient. It has almost like a little bit of an intelligence because it is you sort of, or you're creating a proxy, whatever entity sort of. It almost comes into that creating your own entity kind of thing again.
Right.
But or an apparition. Anyway, I was sitting reading a magazine one day, or a comic, whatever I was reading. In our living room. This is the middle of the day. This was a one-story house, and the sound in the kitchen was intense. It sounded like the drawer with all the silverware drawer. This stuff just flew everywhere. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. I went in.
Wow.
The silverware drawer is hanging, like just barely hanging on. All of the silverware is on the ground. All of it. The thing has just like been violently pulled out, and everything flew out. So I was like, that's weird. I don't know. Then I think it was like a week later, I'm sitting basically in the same spot again, reading again. And I heard the kitchen door, which I could see. We had a little, you could see through into the kitchen, whatever. And the kitchen door opened. So I looked up, I thought it was my mom or dad coming home. And I looked over, and we had a big glass. It was a glass door, essentially, a big glass painted glass on the door. And so I stood up, and I could see the handle turning and then stopping. And this is a door you kind of had to pull closed. It stopped like someone just come in, and then it came, and then it was pulled shut. There's there's nobody there.
Yeah.
But the poltergeist activity, that was about it. Occasionally I would lock a door. We had sliding doors onto our back porch. I would lock them, and then I'd go back to check them like a minute later. They'd be unlocked and open a couple of feet. So things like that happened. And my brother had a strange incident there with that breathing. He was home alone one night.
Yeah.
And he heard like breathing coming from seemingly we had 2 dogs, but it wasn't coming from the dogs. He said it seemed to be coming from like the house itself.
Oh,
wow.
But
so that to me struck me as a possible poltergeist thing too. But beyond those, yeah, nothing happened. Nothing was like, no one was like harmed or anything like that. But that struck me as poltergeist activity, probably from angst, buried stuff that I wasn't dealing with at the time.
Yeah. And one of you were
and my brother
at the same time.
I have a twin brother, so he's the same age, and I have a sister who was 2 years younger than me. So we're all going through that puberty thing, and we were going through not usually. Well, yeah, it was financial at the time. My dad, we were getting ready to move back north because we were having financial problems.
Right.
So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. It just seems like most of them are really young children, 10 or under, maybe a little bit older, or and low income, a lot of stress in the house, maybe only one parent. And it just seems like there's been quite a pattern, at least with most of the cases I've read. And it's just interesting how there's always children around when that kind of activity happens. So again, I can't say it's scientific or factual. It's just something I've kind of pieced together a little bit. I'm sure there's plenty of cases that don't fit that would prove me wrong, but I can only say I haven't come across.
No, most do though. Most really do. Mm-hmm. There's usually kids involved, children of some kind, and as you said, with financial issues and
some kind of stressor.
Major stressor.
And I think just like anything else, you're looking for escape, you're looking for something to distract you, whatever it is, and maybe that's how they're tapping into these abilities that we may have that we get shut off from, that every once in a while that little door opens up. Or again, when you're young and your mind isn't so busy and occupied, and you're not less jaded and stuck in your ways. When you're a kid, you're all about imagination and creating, and so
that's true. Isn't it also true when you're a kid that going back to some of my earliest experiences, I never I didn't fear when things happened because I had no reference point. So I wasn't like instantly terrified by something. Like you talk about beds, your bed rocking. I think even in recent times, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But when I was a kid, for about a year,
let me just interject. I was alone.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Which is such a drag.
If the bed's rocking,
Yeah.
Now my brother and I shared a room when I was a kid, and he was, in a separate bed on the other side of this little, bedside stand thing there. And every night for about a year, maybe it was a little over a year and a half, maybe. As soon as my brother would drift off and the house would be quiet, my bed would start rocking. And I mean, I could lean over the bed and I could see the bedspread kind of slightly swing. And I was being rocked. Right. Something was physically pushing the bed. This happened, and it would last for 30 minutes, And usually to me, I got so used to it. It just kind of, it did soothe me kind of. I'd go to sleep. Once when it happened, I woke up, and sometimes we'd keep a light on. There's like a lot of kids, I was afraid of the dark as a little kid. And I had a light on my dresser across from me. There was this completely black form. It was a woman. I could tell it was a woman, but like black beyond black in this sense. It's just like a perfect cardboard cutout of black. And I could see her putting her hand under the light, pulling the light chain and shutting the light off. Now, a lot of people would be like, holy shit, and you're going to scream or whatever. I just got more comfy and just nestled down and went back to sleep.
Well, I think that goes back to your feelings, though, doesn't it? Because you can sense the difference between there being danger and there just being something unexplainable.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I think especially because you seem to be attuned to that kind of energy, even at a young age. Like I've even when my bed was shaking violently, I never felt like it was something evil. I didn't necessarily know it was something good. I mean, what are you doing? Like, find a better way to communicate with me than this. I'm trying to sleep.
Try harder.
but I didn't feel a sense of danger or that I should not be there or anything like that. And I've definitely walked into rooms where I felt like there's no one in the room, but I felt like this is not a place I want to be for very long. I need to do what I need to do and go. And it's very interesting. But I think that's part of the problem too, is that people don't trust their intuition anymore. We tend to let our brains overthink our situations. And if you go back to listening to your feelings, your initial reactions, and start guiding yourself by that, I think you'll find that a lot more self-serving than letting your brain talk yourself out of danger.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's, I don't know, it's a definitely, it's not imagination. I think that's what people put it. Oh, it's my imagination. Intuition is really closer to what it is. And intuition, is often proved correct. When you think, oh, there's something I don't trust about that person, and they prove that to be correct. Mike is really good at picking out people to not trust. I mean, so many times I've been like, seems like a nice guy. And Mike's like, nah, I don't like him. And time will prove that Mike was the correct one.
Yeah, I can read people really well.
And it's not just because he's a pessimist. And I wouldn't call you a pessimist. No.
I'm a realist.
A realist, yes.
Yeah. There's a difference between believing that the human race sucks and knowing it.
Right.
I think that's the thing. It's like I'm a good judge of character, but I'm bad at following through. Like I will identify it and then go, I'm probably wrong, or I'm probably overthinking this, and letting my brain do exactly what I'm complaining about. Going past your intuition and letting your brain take over and decide what your action should be. Trust your intuition. There's a reason we have it.
Absolutely. It's an instinctual thing. It goes back to our very beginnings, I think.
And maybe that's why when things like that, when I talked about that voice, we didn't go home. I mean, I guess we could have taken the dog with us. We slept in that bed where I heard the voice.
From under your pillow.
Yeah, between the pillow and my ear. And intuition just said, I don't feel like I'm in danger. I feel like something weird happened, something unexplainable happened. But, when we lived in the place that Mike kind of just briefly talked about with the very thick walls. Like you couldn't, it was really hard to hang up pictures there because the walls they had like a metal. It was built in the like the turn of the
20s.
Yeah, like the 20s. And it was like a bomb shelter, it felt like. It wasn't, but someone built it to last.
Incredibly solid.
Yeah. And we had so many strange experiences. Like
that place was unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's where Mike saw the full-bodied apparition, and we found the guy in the historical society. Mike's like, that's him, and it was Edward Heineman. Yeah, sorry, and he owned
the building that had been there, Heineman's Meat Market, an old butcher.
Yeah, and he died falling down the stairs right where Mike saw him.
Well, we went to our local. We lived at Elmhurst, Illinois at the time. We went to our local historical society, which was in this old mansion, which is itself supposed to be haunted. Never anything there. Glass Memorial Mansion, and we're looking up the old microfiche stuff, and we're talking to the couple of the old gents who were there, and they kind of pointed us to, like, oh, where do you live? We live at 124 South York. Oh my God, yeah. That used to be the original phone exchange. They're like, yeah, we know. They still had the sign was still kind of built into the building. And anyway, I'm losing my train of thought. Where am I going with this?
Well, that's where we found this picture of.
Yes. So, this one night. This is back. We were in our early 20s. There's only 3 apartments on the second floor. The first floor was a German store, and the basement was a German restaurant, the Ratskeller, owned by the store, whatever. Really fun place. We knew everybody.
You're going to lose your train.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
As I start to lose my train. No, but so anyway, we had this huge party one night. We used to open up the window and we could go into this building next door, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? Anyway, so I'm up with my one of my neighbors rather, Jim, and we're sitting on the back porch on the second floor. It's like 4 a.m. This is back when, I was up at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Probably not. But, we're sitting there talking, and this is the rear, of course, the restaurant downstairs and the store downstairs. All of a sudden we hear what sounds like a door slamming, and then someone like taking like a bucket full of nuts and bolts and strewing them across the ground. It was lightly raining this night, I remember. And anyway, I remember Jim, my friend, just like kind of looked at me and he froze. Now I wasn't afraid. I just didn't think anything was going on. I leaned my chair back and I looked over the balcony there, and there was a large man standing there wearing an apron. It's one of those weird things. Sometimes when you see paranormal or apparitions or whatever, certain things are incredibly detailed.
Yeah.
For like, and it's why,
Yeah.
But I could see that his hair, he was basically in like mostly shadow, but I could make out his hair. It was kind of wild, and I could like almost like individual strands of his hair, kind of like wild. And he was wearing an apron, and he was slightly swaying to his left and to his right. Anyway, so this guy standing there. So I leaned up and I told Jim, I'm like, no, it's just someone closing up the restaurant for the night. He's like, Mike, it's 4 a.m. and they're not open tomorrow.
Yeah. They were.
And so we both instantly looked over again, and there's nobody there. And now I should explain that the back of this was the building itself. And then there was 2 huge walls on the left side and on the rear. And the only place, if it was a person to go, would be where we park our cars in this small little parking area. And so nobody went by. So we immediately went down, like making sure no one's breaking in. We went in, they have security lights on at the front of the building. You can see all the way to the back. There's nobody there. And then this gets weirder. So we're coming back up. We get up to the top landing, and the back door, which is wedged because no one had air conditioning in this place. This is an old building. And sadly, we couldn't even put in window units because the windows were this weird set.
Train.
I know.
Okay.
So anyway, so we get up to the landing, and the door slams violently in our face. And now this door was like wedged with, a doorstop.
Yeah.
I don't know how it happened. It doesn't make any sense. There was no wind at all that night. It slammed violently in our face. So we looked at each other and we're like, well, let's go to bed. Yeah. Good night, Massey.
But so many weird things happen there. Our speakers would go boom, 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 in the middle of the night.
Usually about 3 a.m. every night.
Yeah, and Mike took in the receiver. There's nothing
So
wrong.
multiple places.
Yeah, I mean, we heard screeching tires
Well,
one night.
we should get
Back to the intuition, we didn't move because of that. We moved because they didn't allow pets and we wanted a cat.
Yeah.
But we did not. Yeah, so we.
Yeah, but you didn't
It's
sense
not
anything that said we need to get out of here.
Yeah, yeah, like you see these movies, Get Out, and everyone does.
Right.
Nothing ever told us to get out.
Oh, no.
We heard a crying
Matter of fact.
baby. Yeah.
We had that helpful thing the one time.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can tell you're helpful, but our intuition was like, it's okay.
Mhm.
And it was.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a cool place
Wait,
to
we
live.
have to tell Scott about the weirdest thing that happened there, though, paranormally.
Which one?
The spinning.
Oh, yeah. This is Mike's favorite. You tell him.
All right, so in the middle of the night,
I have to go powder my nose. Is that okay?
Sure.
in the middle of the night, Julie, well, I was woken by Julie saying, like, do you see it? And I did see something, but it's not what we pieced this together later. What I saw was this to my right. I was close to the window in the bedroom. There was this what looked like a plasma like gelatinous mass that was like it had just splatted on the wall and was slowly oozing down the wall.
Wow.
Like literally, I'd never felt anything. I mean, it felt like a movie, like where you get like gray streak here it goes.
Yeah.
But literally, it's like I couldn't catch my breath. I reached over Julian and put the light on, whatever it was, instantly was gone. But it was like this. It was a mass. It looked gelatinous or plasma-like, and it was emitting a blue light from inside. Anyway, later we talked about, because I thought that's what Julie had seen. That's not what Julie saw. Julie woke up and saw what she said was like looked like
a blue spinning.
a blue luminescent, like spinning top type of object above her.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so what I figure happened is when she said, "Do you see it?" It was reacting to the voices and then moved.
Yeah.
And then splat, whatever it did. It seemed like splat almost on the wall.
Yeah.
And then when I turned the light on, it was gone. But that was absolutely bizarre.
But we did not pack our bags.
No, we didn't.
I mean,
Okay,
it's like
Right.
it was jarring.
That was jarring.
Yeah. But I can't say I was ever afraid. A lot of
It
times
was exhilarating kind of.
one of us would be the only people in the whole building, because like Mike said,
It's only 2 other apartments.
and it was just, there was weird stuff, but like nothing to be afraid of. Like nobody ever got hurt. Nobody was, there was never like big monster faces or
Right.
anything.
No
There was just,
violence.
like,
Yeah.
Right. There was just like weird little things. Like the first year we spent, I'd be in it was a small apartment.
Yeah.
I'd be in like this little kitchen area. Mike would be in the living room. And we were always like, "What'd you say? What?
Yeah.
What?" Because it was always like,
Yeah, a lot of muffled voices, yeah.
and it could have been like, no, it couldn't. I was going to say it could be one of our neighbors, but they were situated in a way where that really wouldn't
And
happen.
those walls were
But-
thick, even between the apartments.
But
What do you
just
mean?
like weird little things, like ding, ding, ding. I don't know.
Well,
But it did dissipate after a while.
But when you're talking over the course of weeks or months too, and a little weird thing happens here, a little weird thing happens there. Like when we tell stories, we're talking about, over the course of weeks or months or years. And it makes it sound like, oh my God, every day, you wake up and something happens.
Exactly.
And the reason I say this is because when people are listening to it, I'm sure there's people that are going, I can't believe, like, why didn't you just get out? But it's not like every day something is happening to you guys where you're like, okay, you get used to it like I did in, where it was an everyday occurrence to me, where every day it would move my notebook or my jacket or would tap me on the shoulder, it was like a constant thing. But before we wrap up, I want to, first of all, thank you guys so much for sharing all this. I can tell we have a lot more. So will you guys come back and do another episode on this?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I'd love
Excellent.
Yeah, lots more to
Excellent.
say.
I want to ask you though, before we wrap up, I want to ask you about this spinning thing. Did you guys get any kind of electrical charge or a sense of like your hair standing up or anything that would give an idea that maybe it was electric?
No,
which is
I've
weird because
never even
I
thought
told
of
you
that.
about the thing with where I think it was my mother visiting me in the closet. I definitely felt an electrical field,
Right.
electrical-esque field there.
Mhm.
Nope. When this happened, I mean, you would think we should have been feeling something. No,
No,
I have no memory of
I
any.
did not either.
No.
Because
Yeah, that's
here's, I
really.
guess, what I,
I mean,
because
I
I always
felt
have
like
to,
that, like, oh my
oh,
feeling,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but not like,
I've thought about that though with this incident because it really, I mean, what I saw looked like plasma. It
yeah.
looked like
Mhm.
plasma. I'm like, should I be feeling something? I even thought that at the time, even in my like, can't catch my
Yeah.
breath kind of thing.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't. I didn't notice anything, and either I don't believe you did either.
Yeah. Not, no, no, not like that. Just
No.
like a little, like,
See,
you
because
know,
here's the challenge, right? Is that it could be anything. It could be a ghost. It could be
Yeah,
how it's trying to manifest itself, maybe trying to gather the energy, and that's just how it's coming out. It could be that it's
I
some
think
kind
that
of portal. It could be that, it's something trying to come through a portal. I mean, there's so many possibilities of what it
absolutely.
could
yes.
be.
Yeah,
And of
absolutely.
course, my mind is immediately to, okay, let's narrow down some possibilities here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If it's
Right.
not electrical, then you could kind of eliminate a certain number of things. It's not something in the wiring that's gone haywire. It's not
Mhm.
something that's in the air like ball lightning, for example, because that was one of the things
Right.
I thought was,
However,
is it like ball lightning where it's just this little bit that's just kind of hovering in the air and spinning,
yeah,
like because ball lightning will do that, but it's usually a
yeah,
little bit large and
you're right.
outside.
I should say quickly though that we did have that, as Julie started to say really quickly, that we had every night we would have this about 3 in the morning, and we had to unplug our stereo at night because of this. We would have this, it'd be like through the speakers, but the little monitor light on the receiver would be throbbing in unison with it. It'd
Ooh.
be like a boom, boom, boom. Then it would get faster and louder. Boom, 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 boom. And it would get like so loud.
Like at 2 in the
It was
morning.
like shatteringly loud. And our neighbors would never
Wow.
hear it, which is weird. But so we had to unplug. I took it into two places. They're like, there's nothing wrong with it. And it never happened during the day. When we moved, I had that receiver for another few years.
Right.
Nothing ever. It seemed like a spirit was using
Yeah, using the
electricity to get our attention.
Yeah, like we're
Well,
not saying it
yeah.
wasn't the electricity, but
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, see, we're going to go into a whole nother
No, I just
podcast.
wanted
Well,
Yeah,
to
no,
know
but
that-
that's
Yeah.
a good point, because how many times have you heard people that do investigations say, all of a sudden all the juice drained from my camera, and that's a brand new
Yeah.
battery, and then they
Right,
walk out
right.
of the house and all of a sudden it's back. I mean, they do have to draw from something to
Right.
be able to interact or whatever. So that does make a lot of sense. But I'm sorry, you were going to say something, Mike?
I don't know. I did want to add one thing about the one friendly thing that happened there is this is back in the days when you would get a physical, piece of paper for like a hotel reservation. And oddly enough, it's for the same thing we're going to this year.
Yeah.
So we've been going this thing on and off for many years, but I couldn't find it. And we were kind of panicking, like, I don't know. I knew I was studying, and Julie was at work, and all of a sudden we had this near our phone about a stack of just a ton of books and stuff. From the very bottom of this thing, a single piece of paper flew out and slowly floated and landed on the ground. I went over and picked it up. I'm like, that's the thing I've been looking for.
Yeah.
That's it.
It was
Wow.
the
It was like this.
reservation.
I really think the spirits. That's the first thing I said. I'm like, thank you. I've been looking for this.
Yeah.
That's
They-
amazing. I've
Yeah.
been looking for my winning lottery ticket.
Yeah, yeah. Where's that?
But that's how a whole other problem got started at once. No, it's really so fascinating, because I think there's certain things that I think are in this world that are amazing. Like I was just telling a friend of mine the other day about how, you watch animals who can only communicate on the most basic of levels, yet they somehow learn their place. They learn the pecking order. They learn how to challenge, to kind of usurp the authority and take over the pecking order. And like they do all this with the most minimal of communication.
Yeah.
And I think about all the stuff that we have at our disposal, and it's so frustrating that we can't understand what is the message. Like, why are you doing this to me? Why can't we find a way to communicate?
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. I think we'll get there one day, But right now we don't have that. It's almost like a Nostradamus prediction. Like, it's great that you're shaking my bed all the time. What are you trying to tell me? Otherwise,
Yeah.
knock it off. Because if I can't understand this, you're just pissing me off at this point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like we're so close to being able to do something.
Yeah.
And I think
I
that's
think
part
so.
of what makes it so fascinating for me, is that what are we missing? Where could we be if we could understand this? What could we
Yeah.
do with that information? How can I help you, or what are you trying to tell me? And it's so hard to not be able to help someone or something that needs help
Yeah.
simply because you can't communicate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a really good point. Maybe we're not supposed to
Well,
intervene.
can I bring up one thing? Because
Yeah,
this
go ahead.
reminds me of something. If I can just say one more
Oh,
thing really
absolutely. Yeah.
quick. I sometimes messages to me are clear. I had a visitation dream. That's not what I was going to talk about. Now I'm going to digress on that. I had a visitation dream from my mother once. It was clearly not a normal dream. I was literally physically felt like I was somewhere. Colors were vibrant. I could feel her touch. That was strange. So, but anyway, talking, I'm still on the idea of parents. In the room we're sitting in, you can't see, but there's a buffet in front of me.
Okay.
And one night, there's a picture of my folks and Julie's, different family members on
I
there.
call it the buffet of the dead.
Yeah, the buffet of the
Yeah,
dead.
it's all like
And
people
so
pass.
I saw a picture. There's a picture of my parents, and just for no reason at all, I just said, "Love you guys, good night." And I turned around. It sounds like that. It was that loud. It was coming from inside the buffet,
Oh,
and I'm like, and then it hit me. I'm like, wait a minute. Today's my birthday. It was my
Yeah.
birthday. They were telling me happy birthday.
Or
wow.
maybe, yeah,
That's what I feel.
yeah, yeah.
Because I had just spoken to them, and all of a sudden this rapping from inside the thing was really loud. And then
Wow.
it stopped, and I said, "Thanks, Mom and Dad, whatever." And then
But
That's
see,
right.
maybe there's a problem to trying when you try to put an answer to that. Like you
Oh,
didn't come up with an answer to the rocking bed, but
right.
maybe you can. Like this was pretty simple because it was Mike's birthday. It was his
yeah, it was
parents' picture
Yeah.
right there, so you can kind of piece together things. But maybe I think people do try to say, "Oh, well, this is haunted because of this," and I think
Right,
that is
yeah.
sort of the romantic in us.
Mhm.
We want the answer. This woman died here and now she's here for, whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
And maybe those are true. Maybe the simplest answer is the
Occam's
answer.
razor.
Yeah, Occam's
Yeah,
razor,
very
exactly.
possible. I just
Yeah.
feel bad for the guy that owned the butcher shop, though, because that just means that he's still working. And how
Yeah.
long has he been dead? Like, when I better not have to work. Somebody said to me one day, because I used to work like 2 full-time jobs, and then I had a part-time job I would work occasionally. And they said to me one day, they said, "You just have the best job waiting for you in heaven." And I said, "I better not. Like, I better just be done working when I'm done
Damn
being
right.
here, because I've had enough."
Yeah, you work your ass off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should say really quick though, I did find Edwin Heinemann's in our researches. I
Yeah.
found his obituary, and
Yeah.
he did indeed die at our exact
He
address.
fell down the
He
stairs.
fell down the stairs and broke his neck.
Yeah.
And so that would have been 81 years before I saw his apparition.
Yeah.
And there was one doctor at the time in Elmhurst, Illinois, who pronounced him dead on the scene. Anyway, I found all that. I was like, I can't believe this stuff. And that's him.
Yeah.
I have the picture of him. Like, that's him.
Now, why he is coming back, that's a tale for another podcast, right? When we can figure this out.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I would love to
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
I think it is interesting that, the idea of people just wanting to be known, because I think that that's
Yeah.
kind of what life nowadays is all about, with all the people on TikTok and everybody just
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
things to be seen. It's kind of
true.
interesting that we possibly are not letting go of that at death.
It really does seem like
It
that.
is.
That's a nicely put.
Like it's Facebook of the afterlife.
The
Yeah.
Facebook
know?
of the dead. There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
the Tibetan Facebook of the dead. But in the future, it's going to be very obvious. Like, as you're watching movies, you can tell when movies were shot based on the technology, right? Like, cell phones have
Right.
advanced so much. If it was a flip phone, we know kind of what years that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
filmed and all that. You're going to be able to tell what ghosts are, because they're all going to be with their neck down, looking at their hand.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're gonna know what generation they're from very, very quickly.
Exactly.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, you won't
Yeah.
see them working.
Right. Yeah, yeah, I hope not. Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Well, thank you
Yeah.
guys so much. This has been
Thank
so
you.
enlightening and enjoyable. Such great conversation. Hang on for me for a minute because I did have a quick story that I forgot to tell you before we started. I've told it on the show before, so I won't bore my listeners with it. But it's been such a pleasure having you guys on. Julie, I'm so glad that you joined us for this one. Mike,
you.
real quick, you and I had talked that your third book is getting close to being finished.
Oh, second.
Really
Second.
excited.
Second.
Second book. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Really excited about that.
Yeah,
I'm just glad that in the
thanks.
midst of all this stuff, you're still writing.
Yep.
Yes.
I have to write. It's one of those things like you. I think certain things you just have to do.
Yeah.
Writing for me is like breathing. So yeah.
Yep.
Gotta write.
Yeah, I guess I feel like what would be the point of my life if I wasn't creating things? That's, I think, what I'm here to do. You know,
Right on.
whether it's creating shows to entertain or educate or make people think like this show, or whether it's, just like pointing people to a piece of art or something like that. I
Right
just
on.
think that that's what I'm here to do. And if I'm not hearing or if I'm not doing that, I'm going to be empty.
Right. No,
Sure.
I agree.
Probably
thank you for
explains
doing
my
it.
schedule. Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you guys. We'll have you guys back on before too much longer. For you folks listening, this will air. Let me see. What are we looking at? So July 23rd. I have another guest for another paranormal episode lined up this month.
Awesome.
Coming up next week, I will have another interesting music episode, and then the first August episode will be the second part of my dive through Mozart's Requiem. So lots of stuff coming up. If you guys have something that you're specifically wanting me to take a listen to, let me know. As long as it's not Van Halen, I would probably be open to it. Just kind of had enough of them. No offense to anybody who loves Van Halen. Sorry, Corey Morissette and Mark Meyer. I know that you guys are slight fans of that band. You guys have a great week. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. We'll see you in the next one. Cheers.